the Secret Gallery podcast at the Secret Gallery. Secret podcast live from the Secret Gallery. Not live. The Secret podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Secret Podcast, coming to you from the Secret Gallery in beautiful downtown Astoria, Oregon. I'm Chris Minnick. I'm here with Philip Barish, and today we're going to be talking with David Quan. The gallery is open now for regular business on Wednesday through Sunday, so you can stop by and visit us, or you can visit us at www.thesecret.gallery or on Artsy. Secret Gallery is sponsored by Sweet Relief Cannabis, located on Commercial Street here in Astoria. And if you would like to become a sponsor or find out more about becoming a sponsor of the Secret Podcast, you can contact us through our website. But yeah, we're really excited to be talking with David Quan today. And so without further ado, take it away, Philip.
All right. And first, we want to thank you, Chris, once again, the instigator, the man who makes all of this happen, as always. Thank you, Chris. And David, I am very excited about talking with you. I've really enjoyed looking through a rather sizable body of work, and I have a lot of questions. And here's where I would really like to start. I want to start with what I would characterize as your two-dimensional work, as opposed to the large-scale kind of mural things you're doing. And you have a really marvelous, absurdist sense of what you do. Your work is very absurd, kind of ridiculous. It's always fun. And I would really like to start by asking you about Mad Magazine and the artists of Mad Magazine, probably also the National Lampoon and maybe Zap. I'm seeing elements of that kind of work in your work. So first, am I off on that? And if I am not off on that, could you speak to it?
Oh, yeah. I grew up on all that stuff. I remember going to the grocery store with my mother, and, the first thing I would do is ditch her and go to the magazine aisle and just start digging through, Mad Magazine and Cracked and all those magazines. And those are pretty much my first comics I really got into. I didn't really get into comic books till later. I grew up kind of sheltered. My mother and father are both Pentecostal Christians, and they kind of discouraged a lot of secular influences like music and comic books and a lot of TV. But I would just pour over that Mad Magazine for hours, or the hour that, my mom's shopping and she'd have to come find me. So a lot of the artists in there, and I know they're starting to die now. We just recently lost Mort Drucker a couple of months back, but so many of those artists were so influential on really the next several generations of not just comic artists, but just, anyone that appreciated caricature and parody and satire and absurdity and all that stuff. And all of those elements are really very much in your work. There's no question about it. And so some of the stuff I'm thinking about in particular. So my thoughts exactly, which was it's a blog you've done that has some very, very funny stuff on it. And it's not just that your drawings are funny, but your whole notion of what we should find funny, what we should laugh at, I think is really, it made looking at your work, it gave me another dimension of humor, of just being able to laugh. So like one of the things I want to point out is Luster Kaboom. Is that when I clicked on it, it says lusterkaboom.com is for sale for $3,595. And there was part of me that wondered, is that true, or is it part of your humor? And does it tie into who you are in terms of how funny I perceive you to be? So first of all, is that real? Is that real, or is that another thing about you that's funny? Oh, I lost that years ago, but I had it for a long time, and I kind of, I wasn't up to date. And then next thing you know, they wanted a bunch of money for that .com. And I was like, I'm not that attached to it.
Okay, which makes it even funnier.
Darn it.
Yeah. That also puts it once again into the category of the Mad Magazine, National Lampoon kind of category. Is that there's a lot of stuff that you do. There's a lot of puns in what you do. There's a lot of humor, and there's a lot of your stuff is not mean-spirited. Your stuff is really fun without ever getting nasty. So I want you to talk about how you moved through wanting to do comics, reading Mad Magazine, being in a household that really wasn't encouraged, and how you kept kind of like your creative side alive as you determined it was going to be part of what you did for your life's work.
Well, I wouldn't say discouraged. My mother was very encouraging of my artwork. She actually, when I did get into comic books, I was like all in. I loved comic books, and I was, I pretty much learned how to draw by like, emulating all of the comic book pictures and retracing them. And, I learned all the bad anatomy from all those terrible 90s comic book artists. And I had to go to school and relearn all my anatomy. But my mom was super supportive. I didn't really want to go to art school, but she kind of insisted that I go just to, take full advantage of my talent. And so when I went to art school, I went to SVA, and I enrolled in cartooning to do comic books. And I think I just kind of got burned out real fast, and I switched over to illustration because I realized, making comics was just so much work. Instead of doing, like one illustration, you had to illustrate a whole book. And I remember that just seemed so daunting once I started doing it. And so I switched over to illustration. I wanted to like kind of apply it to fine art, but I wanted to like learn fundamentals of like, drawing and painting instead of more, just expressive approach to painting. But yeah, my mother, she went to school for art, and she's actually a really good artist. She's a sculptor. She does like bronze and iron poured casts and stuff. And she does like drawings and fun paintings and stuff. So she was like super encouraging of my art. She was just very fundamental Christian, and I think she was turned off by a lot of my influences like Mad Magazine and Juxtaposed and all those lowbrow artists that were popular back in the 90s. I was kind of like painting stuff like that, and she really that's where Luster Kaboom came from. I was hiding my art from her for a long time. When I came back from New York, I had all these paintings, and one day I looked around and I was like, "Hey, where's all my paintings?" And she's like, "Oh, I threw all those terrible things in the garbage. They were so ugly." But yeah,
and that's because of the pop culture reference. So first, I want to say I'm glad you corrected me. So she encouraged your art, but she just came at it from a very different position in terms of your pop culture influences. If I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you corrected that.
Years. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I wanted to make sure I'm clear on that she actually did encourage your artwork, but didn't like the fact you were reading Mad Magazine and you were reading Zap and all that other stuff.
Oh, yeah. I think it's funny. A turning point came. I show at this gallery here called Art One, and I've been showing there since the 90s. But I put a painting in there and it sold. But my mom, she was in this lawyer's office, this really fancy lawyer's office, and she's talking to this lawyer about some stuff, and she looks up and she saw this monster I painted, and the lawyer bought it and put it on his wall. And my mom was kind of shocked, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh, that's my son's painting. Why would you buy such ugly painting?" But
oh no!
I think, well, she didn't say that, but she's like, kind of taken aback that a lawyer would buy one of my monsters and hang it on his wall. And I think at that point she kind of realized, there's a market for this, and I think she kind of was a little more supportive as far as like me drawing like these ugly, gnarly monsters. I don't really draw that many monsters anymore, but we kind of like got on the same page, like, I want to say like 15 years ago. And since then we've had art shows together, and it's been really fun.
Oh, that's great. And I've noticed too that your children are really pivotal to a lot of what you do. So it sounds to me now like you have a multi-generational thing on both ends happening in
Oh,
terms of
yeah.
what's feeding you. That's
Yeah.
really good. Because another thing that I would really respond to, and I want to start talking about your what we'll call your site specific work, your installations, I guess, for lack of a better term. I guess let's open it up right now with the Scottsdale Civic Center Library, the Luster Kaboom Funhouse, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
appeared to be a significant extravaganza. First, I want to say that I was really moved by the fact that came out of you recognizing that it was a public art installation and that the library was instrumental in your development, not just as an artist, but as a human being, and that you felt compelled to pay back the debt that the library had given you by having this show. So I was very, very moved by that. The second thing I was moved by is that your children, your daughter and your son at that time were really important to how that whole thing developed, how it was installed, how it all looked. So speak to all of that.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I had spent like so much time ever since we moved to Scottsdale. I spent so much time in that library. Just, I would just go there whenever I had time. I didn't really do many like social activities. I didn't really do sports or anything like that. I would just go to the library and, look up, artists and photography and, like world history stuff. And I was like super fascinated by, just like images. I would go and I'd just be like looking through picture books and, whatnot, children's books. And I just ended up spending so much time in that library. As well as, bookstores, Barnes and Noble and Bookstore and all that. I would just like always be looking through books. I love books. So when they asked me about that show, I was like super psyched because I had already felt like I knew that library so well. I'd spent so much time in there. But then, it was really kind of, they're just like, you can do whatever you want to do. And I wasn't really, sure. It just kind of came about, I really love, I love children's art. I love, like when you go to the state fair and you go into, the Coliseum or wherever, and, they have all the high school art and the grade school art, and there's like ribbons and stuff. And you look through it all and it's like all so bizarre and weird. And these kids are thinking up, just the most outrageous, weird stuff. The scale is all wonky and, their animals are so kind of cute, but terrifying. I really just love that. I remember, for that, library show, there was a wall and, it was supposed to be like kind of, so the kids could like, engage in it with like a chalkboard and they would draw their own stuff and like add to the pictures that I would draw. But I really love like stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not sure what else I can say about that.
Well, I want to talk about this a little bit further because you hit on a couple things just listening to you that I think is really important. And one of them is that you have maintained a very childlike quality to what you do. And what I just picked up in what you were saying there is that one of the great things about being around kids is that they're uninhibited. They're not self-aware. They're only concerned with the creative process. And I think that, what happens characteristically is when kids hit kind of like adolescence, what we would know as, middle school now, is that they become self-aware and they start to lose that inherent, that natural creative ability, that intuitive ability that they already have. The thing about your work, and as far as I can tell for this show specifically, is that you were able to tap into that, your inner child. And when I was looking at photos of the show, you have so many things that are not just interactive, but things that as if kids themselves had assembled them. So in your answer, I'm really responding to the fact that you're saying that little kids intuitively are creative. And when they
when they're not inhibited, they're even more creative. And I felt very strongly that your show had a lot to do with that. So do you want to talk about that at all, a little bit further?
Well, yeah, I think I really respond to like, like kind of chance and randomness. Like a lot of the things that I had at that show were things that I would go to thrift stores and I would just go through toy sections and knickknacks, and I try and find things that were useful or interesting to look at, and I just ended up spending a bunch of money just buying random things, and then when I got there, I was just kind of assembling it all. I think kids, their art is just a translation of their influences, and when you see something that kind of makes you respond, I think it's easy to just turn that into something artistic because it's something you like. It's something that kind of speaks to you. There was a lot of things in that show that I wanted to do that I just ended up not doing for practical reasons. Like I had gotten some painter's plastic, and I was trying to figure out a way to make these giant inflatable rooms. But I think the way that whole show worked out was kind of just okay, I can do this, so let's do it. And it wasn't really as thought out as it probably should have. It was more kind of like thrown together, and kind of like there were parts that were thought out. Like I was working with this guy, Lou Nasty, in New York, and he does mechanical displays. And I kind of told him about this opportunity, and he was really helpful. He created a lot of the machinery to make that giant face work and the arms move and stuff. And he really inspired me to like, try and think outside of the box and do whatever just came to mind. And he would help me with the mechanics of it. But for the most part, like a lot of those things happened right there when I was there. I would just make these big boxes and fill them with a bunch of junk and toys and create these foam caves and fill them with Furbies and, stupid stuff.
Yeah, but how fun was that? I mean, so when you were given the space, so the square footage it's a space you're familiar with, you're intimate with. Thematically, it appears to be kind of like a midway kind of circusy. There's also some aquatic themes in there. So did you develop the themes independently of each other, or did you develop themes once you got into the space? How was it that you determined what the content would look like?
Well, it was, I think it was just, all the things that, I had been influenced by up to that point. Excuse me. There was I was working with this other guy, Bob. I found this ad on Craigslist, and I went to go work for him. He owned a sandblasting place, but he needed a painter, and he was doing all these carnival rides. So he would get like the carnival would come to town on the off season, and they'd come to Phoenix in the winter time, and they'd want all their rides fixed. So they would come to Bob, and Bob needed he wanted to do these wraps and kind of like bring the carnival up, to this like new technology of like these vehicle wraps. And the carnies there were just like, no, we don't want that. We want paint. We want you to paint these rides. And so Bob had hired me to be a digital illustrator for these wraps. And he's like, well, they want paint. So, you're going to have to paint them. And I was like, well, I never really painted a giant ride before. Like, I'll just see what happens. And it turned out to be like this really great experience. Like, it was like all these carnies sitting around, and, they actually lived there in the off season. They would just pull up in their trailers, and it was like the circus, just, in their off time. But, they would sit there and heckle me while I was like painting. And, it was really cool. Cause then, I got to painting these large scale works, and, I got used to being around all this carnival stuff, and it was great. Like, I remember I would paint something and I'd be like, oh, this looks terrible. And Bob would show up and I'd be like, yeah, this doesn't look that great. His head's kind of wonky. Like, oh no, that looks great. Let's keep moving. Let's keep painting weird stuff. and it was just so fun. But it was like a big influence. And then after that, when I moved to New York, I was working with that Lou Nasty guy, and he would do these crazy, he'd build these machines and he just hired me to like paint them. I'd be painting like, Santa's workshop, and I'd be painting faces on these talking trees and just all this weird stuff. And so like, I think the Funhouse kind of is like, a continuation of like all those weird jobs that I had and all those weird influences being around the Carnies and
so
Lou.
So the scale though, so when you were in New York, so you originally had gone to New York to pursue your comic book thing, is it correct? That you were back there looking at the comic book industry?
Well, originally I went back there for school to do comics, but then I kind of got disenchanted with comics. I was doing underground comics for a while, but I was never doing them seriously because just the amount of work. And I was more going back for, artistic opportunities, but I didn't really know what they were at the time. I just wanted to, expose myself to like, more stuff. I was doing a lot of paintings in Phoenix and having gallery shows. So I was just hoping to have a continuation of that when I went to New York, but I wasn't really too specific about, about doing comics or paintings or anything.
So the comics you were doing in Phoenix, what I was looking at was the World of Magical Moments, were some of the strips that I was looking at.
Oh yeah. Magical Moments. Yeah. That was, I got interviewed by the New Times, the free weekly in Phoenix. And, there was this girl, this lady Claire, and, she interviewed me for something. And, I think at one point she's like, well, what would you do if you could just do one thing all day long? And I was like, well, I'd probably just make comics. And so like a week or two later, she calls me up and she's like, hey, you want to do a comic for the New Times? And I'm like, oh, sure. And so,
that's excellent.
Yeah, I was really stressed out about, because like my whole thing is like making comics on a daily basis, a lot of work, a lot of panels, a lot of thinking, a lot of stories. So Magical Moments was just kind of like almost an autobiographical comic. And I would just, kind of recount things that had happened in the previous week or tell old stories that happened to me. And so it worked out good because I never ran out of stories. And that was a really fun run. That was the first time that I really got, published, and led to a lot of work with the New Times, which I was really psyched about. I always wanted to work for them.
Yeah, the New Times, I just want to kind of add this in here because I spent a fair amount of time going through the New Times. That's a great publication. I mean, you're in there quite a bit, but it's just that obviously serves the community really, really well. And it's, when I was looking at the World of Magical Moments, it was like that was such a perfect vehicle for you to be doing comics in, was the New Times, because it was a really good fit. As from where I stand, that was a really good fit. So so when you were in New York and you started doing these large scale paintings of whatever it is you were doing, at that point, then did you knew you were going to move into murals, or was it a more gradual thing, or did you make a conscious decision that you were going to go large scale murals at some point?
I never really make conscious decisions to do anything. I really just opened myself up to opportunities, it seems like. And when I started working for Bob and doing those carnival rides, people started seeing those carnival rides. And then that's when it really opened the door for murals. Beatrice Moore, this lady who lives in Phoenix on Grand Avenue, she's kind of like, she's this amazing artist, but she really makes things happen down there. And that's kind of like, Grand Avenue is, it's like the part of Phoenix that's really weird and fun. And so she hired me to do some murals down there. And that's kind of when my mural career started taking off. And I started doing large scale works. I never really wanted to do murals, but after doing the carnival rides, I was good at it. So it just kind of came natural.
Okay, because now let's talk about murals for a little bit here, because you've got some really amazing ones. But I want to frame this in kind of like the history of murals, because the roots of what you're doing sink all the way back into where murals came from. So murals, it's artwork directly painted on a wall or a ceiling, but it really goes back to the cave paintings, like the cave paintings of Lascaux, when primitive man was just making images on walls. And as it came through history with, the various materials, the various elements, all of the things that, now define what they are, there are things that are inherent in your images that I think are really important to talk about. One of them is that contemporary murals, that the architectural elements of the building are incorporated. And in all of the murals that I've looked at with yours, that is you're absolutely on the money in terms of honoring that really critical component. Another thing is that because it's art in the public sphere, that you are creating a language. In this case, it's the language of Luster Kaboom that's very distinctive. And I really want to point that out. So I want to start by, first of all, having you respond to how you actually incorporate these architectural elements to make it part of what you're doing. And just if you have any thoughts about the fact that you are really embracing the artistic kind of history of man, going all the way back to, rubbing their hands on the sides of caves. So if you could just kind of respond to that stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it's really important with murals because it's like a whole different kind of, art. It's like, it's very site specific, and, it's got to go with, what's already there. You don't want to put something that doesn't fit. I think a lot of murals today are very, they're very out of place. And I don't want to be mean or anything, but, I think, it's important to consider where it's going. Like, I did this one mural, and it was on the street that was kind of crazy. There was a lot of crime, and there was always cops there. And so I made this jungle that was like these man-eating plants. And it was a really fun mural, but it kind of reflected the area. And I think, people appreciated that. It went good with, just the vibe of the neighborhood.
If that's the one I'm thinking of, they reminded me a lot of the Little Shop of Horrors.
Right,
the feed me plant. And I was going to, so let me just ask you quick here, because it seemed to me that part of what you're really doing in having chosen that image for that building, and now what I just learned in that neighborhood, was the idea of feed me, but feed me what? Feed me creativity, feed me something positive, feed me. I felt that your choice on that particular building, your choice of that plant from, the Little Shop of Horrors, which is a great B grade, Roger Corman film, is that I felt your choice spoke directly to what you were wanting to do to that neighborhood, kind of like lift it up. So am I off on that? Is that part of what you were trying to achieve?
I don't know if lift up is the correct word. I think I'd want to be more of like a reflection of the neighborhood. I would like it to blend in. I'd like it to stand out, but I'd like it to blend in. I think, it's like 15th Avenue where that mural is. It's always kind of been the same. And every time I drive down that street, there's always something crazy going on. And I don't dislike that. I kind of like that.
Well, it's a great mural. And again, you incorporated the architectural elements, the image and it's a long building. I think it's like 1,500 feet long or something. It's really long. And
that one was so hard to do.
The doors, and the windows, the way you've moved the image both around the windows and the doors and along the entire length of the wall. How much prep work did you do as far as how you were going to place the image? Did you do preliminary sketches and then basically do those on the wall? Did you make it up as you went? What did you do?
Yeah, I always do I always do a sketch beforehand, a color sketch, so then I can just buy my colors, and, you know, kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. It's really kind of fun to do, because then once you get a sketch, I just get a long pole with a paintbrush and you're sketching out, you know, almost like how you do on a big canvas with a pencil on a pole. And it's just a really big canvas, and you're just kind of making these giant shapes. I don't know how these muralists do it on these buildings where it's just like a full-on giant building. I think that's pretty mind-blowing. But yeah, it's really fun to like to at least sketch it out. But it's funny, like murals are so much work. I won't do a mural unless I really want to these days, just because it's just you know, it's a lot of paint and a lot of work. But it is fun.
But you're talking about the physicality of the work, what's involved in terms of like schlepping materials up and down ladders, all of that kind of thing is probably what you're referring to there, just the actual labor involved.
Yeah, for many years I've painted houses. I've only recently stopped painting houses, but you know, that's another area where I learned how to use all this paint. You know, painting these large buildings, you know, is really from painting houses too, like, you know, using sprayers and masking things off. And it was really great training for like learning, you know, about paint viscosity and, you know, translucency and all of those things you need to know with paint. It was great, you know, just, you know, having a brush and painting eaves all day. It was really good training for, you know, painting these murals, how to get, you know, these sharp lines with brushwork, or, you know, later on I was using airbrushes, or mostly I use airbrushes now for like, line work and all that stuff. But, yeah, it's really hard work. And especially in Phoenix, Arizona, it's so hot when it's, you know, 6 months out of the year.
Which is well, and so let's talk a little bit about your relationship with the actual surface and materials then, because it's another thing I find to be of great interest is that I've seen, you know, you've got murals on cinder block walls, you've got murals on the sides of dumpsters, I've seen murals on the sides of what appear to be probably 4 by 8 foot sheets of plywood. So given the scale that you're working at, you are developing a very intimate relationship with those surfaces. So talk about that relationship, and also about the handling of the materials, like particularly in Phoenix, where if you're using acrylic based paints, they're going to dry really rapidly, or, you know, so tell me a little bit about those relationships, the physical relationships you have with the surface and with the materials, and the kind of intimacy you have to develop in order to do something of the scale that you're working at.
Yeah, like, I think, you know, when you're a young artist and, you know, you go to the art store and you want to buy art supplies, and everything's so expensive. So you start looking for shortcuts, and you go in the alley and you find old pieces of wood or like, you know, whatever you can find to start painting on. I think a lot of that comes from that, you know, making stuff out of stuff you find. And then you just kind of get used to like working on, you know, surfaces that you find rather than surfaces you prepare. I remember in art school, one of the teachers, the first lesson was to prime a canvas and just get it perfect. He wanted you to like, you know, get all the corners square. He wanted you to stretch it nicely. He wanted you to gesso it like 20 times or something and wet sand it and all that. And then, so we did all that, and we brought in these canvases. They all looked pristine. And, he's like, all right, now set them up against the wall and then go smash them with your feet. So we did that. I always remember that. And I was like, it's so cool to like, you know, make you learn not to like fear these surfaces, just to embrace them. And, you know, nothing's too precious that you can't destroy.
Yeah, well, and I was reading one of your murals was painted over, or I don't want to say removed, but it was, and I think it was called Nerd or
Oh, Nerd
Big Green.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was one of Beatrice's properties. She hired me to paint that wall. And a lot of these murals came about too because it deters graffiti, and I think it's beautiful, but also like it keeps people from wrecking your stuff. And so that building was one of my favorites to do. It was on the side of this venue called the Trunk Space, where they would have all these great shows. They've since moved, but they still have great shows. But that nerd monster, it was painted on the side of the wall that was, pretty much falling apart. And I remember Beatrice telling me, just add a couple extra layers of paint so it'll hold the bricks on. And I think, it was there for years. And then finally they had to replaster it. So that's why that mural came down. I think Beatrice would have liked to keep it, but the wall was crumbling.
Well, and I have to say, of the images I've looked at of your murals, that was actually one of my favorites too, and it's because the wall itself was stepped. It was a series of step ups, and so the placement of the image, where the right-hand side is higher than the left-hand side, where it drops down like 2 feet and then drops down 3 feet. One of the things I like so much about that, the way you placed that mural, is how you worked with the fact that the wall wasn't a single uniform line all the way across. There's another thing I want to point out that's really fun about your murals, and I don't know if you did this on all of them, but I was noticing how you would put your signature in really funny places. And there was a couple in particular where the plaster on, and in this case, it was a blue wall of some kind, had broken off, and you actually had put in the signature Luster Kaboom on what would have been underneath the plaster. There was another one where you had Luster Kaboom, and then you would put, which I believe to be your phone number. There's enough digits in there that it was probably a phone number. So very clever ways of identifying who you are, but also identifying the fact that it's still on a building. So talk a little bit about that, about when you would run across aspects of a building where a part of it is crumbled away, where there's a broken gutter pipe, where there's a window frame that rotted away, that when you got up to those areas, it seems to me you got very inventive about how you were going to handle those inconsistencies in the space itself. So talk a little bit about that.
I think it's fun. When you're up on the ladder, you find little nooks and crannies, and it's just kind of keeping it fun. I remember I did this mural at the school, the art school here, where it's like art high school, like a charter school. But when I got up to the top of the mural, there was these lights on the building, and it's like almost 30 feet up in the air on top of a ladder, and it's kind of like terrifying. But I ended up painting the tops of the lights because I know someone's going to be working on that roof someday, and they're going to see what I put up there. But I think it's just kind of just keeping it fun. That's, if it's not fun, then, no one else is going to think it's funny.
Well, it also kind of reminded me of a lot of the gargoyles on the great cathedrals of Europe, where they're incredibly detailed, but they're, up 150 feet off the ground, and who's going to see them? But it didn't matter because the guy that carved that gargoyle wanted to make a really cool gargoyle. So one of the things, in looking at your work, like there's a couple of images you did that were on cinder block walls, and they're the really kind of cartoony, almost Goonie type images. And the top of the head, where it meets the top of the wall, you then fold the head over to where it's actually literally on the surface that is the top of the wall. So that when you ran into these areas that no one would know that unless they got on top of that wall. And so it's, how you wrapped the image around, and that there would be a handful of people that could really identify that. Dumpsters too. It looks like you did a number of dumpsters, and the dumpsters are really fun because, well, first of all, they're dumpsters,
But the way you work with the actual the construction of the dumpster is really funny, because there's things that you do that, I mean, just the very nature of where you're going to find a dumpster is a lot of people aren't even going to look at it. But here you have these faces on a dumpster that then wrap around the various components and construct of the dumpster. So it looks to me like you just kind of made those up right on the spot and had a really good time doing it.
Well, yeah, I think that's, my best stuff is when I'm just, there and I feel like doing something fun. Yeah, those are some of my favorite things. I remember one time I had all this leftover paint and I was painting my garage. So I ended up just painting this zombie on my garage. But, I paint for like an hour and it ends up being something I really like. And it's always those things that are disposable. It's always those things that I really don't care about, that I think, there's no pressure. There's no expectations. And, dumpsters are fun to do because, like, no one's going to care if the dumpster looks bad.
Yeah, right. It's just a dumpster.
Yeah, like how they cared about those carnival rides. They didn't really care if, the anatomy was perfect or the buildings were square. They just wanted, the imagery, and they wanted to be fast and fun. And, it wasn't for like, critique or anything like that.
Okay, so the Metro Light Rail extension, because this is another one that is of great interest to me. So the Metro Light Rail extension, you created a series of 9 what were called selfie stations. Now, I couldn't find images of the selfie stations, but what I was able to read is that, so Phoenix Valley Metro was their extension of the light rail. You did these 9 selfie stations that you repurposed art from the Luster Kaboom Funhouse. Now, since I couldn't find images of those, tell me about that and tell me how you got involved with a public work project of really that scale. That's a pretty sizable one. So tell me about that.
They always just kind of fall in my lap. I credit a lot of this stuff to Beatrice, the lady on Grand Avenue. Every year they have this Grand Avenue festival where, all the shops and galleries open up, and it's kind of like a big giant block party, and they have a parade. But years ago, she hired me to do these selfie stations, where you just, you have a hole and you put your face in and take a picture. And she had me do like 2 of them or something like that. And every year after that, she's been having me do 1 or 2. And she kind of has a nice collection of all these weird selfie stations now. And I think people saw those, and then somehow that's how the light rail people approached me to do some of those for the light rail. I also did some for the botanical gardens. But those are always super fun. It's like, it's such a great art form where you can like have people put their face in like this weird scenario. Like one of my favorites was, it was this scene of, all of these people polluting rivers with toxic waste and this trucker, hauling away all the wood from the forest after cutting it down. And, people would put their face in there and take a picture. And it's just like, it makes them have to like own up to like all these terrible things that, humans do.
So when you were doing these, so you did 9 of them. I want to make sure that's correct. I'm sure it is. So you did 9 of those. And were they designed to be temporary? And was it 1 per stop for 9 stops? And did you determine how each one would look specific for each stop? Or did you just do them and they kind of got distributed? And if they were temporary, how long were they up?
I can't really remember too many details about that project. But I'm pretty sure each one was made specifically for a stop because they were all on that main street. And I remember I remember going down to Main Street, when I was a teenager, and there was a venue down there that we used to go see shows at. So I knew Main Street very well, and I was kind of psyched to do that project. But there was quite a few businesses down there that I really liked. One that my friend had a coffee shop down there. So I think I made things for like businesses, or kind of like relating to businesses down there, stuff that would go, at the particular stops that would, make sense. I can't remember what all I did. I think one was like a pizza guy, and I remember one was a tiger. But other than that, I can't recall. But I remember it was really rushed. I remember really cranking all those things out really fast. And I remember the day of, there was one selfie station that was just kind of like a massive selfie station. And I remember building a second floor. And it was a scene of an actual metro car with all these people in there. And my father-in-law was driving, helping me get it all down there, and I had to install it all at 5 a.m. And I think one of the pieces fell off his truck on the freeway, and we got there, and it was like kind of like hectic putting it all together, and we're missing this piece, and I had to figure out stuff to make it work.
Oh, and this was the morning of like the ribbon cutting ceremony. It was like right up to that point?
Yeah, it was right down to the wire. And I remember just getting finished and just being like, I didn't even stick around. I went home and went to sleep.
Well, so how's the light rail? Must be pretty nice, right?
It is really nice. It's really done a lot for the city. It's funny because, all the spots that connect the city by the light rail have really flourished. And, it's amazing what it's done for downtown Phoenix. Like ever since they put in that light rail, ASU's moved down there. Businesses and restaurants and people want to live there. I remember when I bought my house down there, it was kind of like a place people avoided. But the light rails really changed a lot around there.
Yeah, light rails do that. I moved here from Portland, and I saw firsthand what light rails do. That's a very interesting thing. So I want to talk a little bit now about the public art component of what you do. I mean, obviously, we talked about the Civic Center Library one, and now the light rail stops. And once again, getting back to the idea that because murals have a direct presence in public life, and that because you are doing murals, one of the things that I was reading about Phoenix is there is an enormous amount of mural production going on there, to the point that it's actually becoming essentially part of the tourism of that city, is that there's murals and teams of mural painters, and that it's really a vital and vibrant part of what the city is about. So talk a little bit about that.
It's funny. I remember I really started doing murals probably about 2009. And shortly after that, after I did a bunch of murals, I moved to New York for about 4 years. And when I moved away is when I really noticed a lot of people were doing lots of murals, and I was kind of bummed out that I missed that whole wave of business. But yeah, it's really crazy how that's taken off in Phoenix. They have these days there now where it's like mural day, and everybody goes and paints a mural. I think it's kind of over the top, and there's been a lot of pushback from neighborhoods because of all the murals.
It's like too much murals.
Yeah, too.
Well, and I'm wondering too, because one of the things that can happen is if they become too politically charged. I know that there is a component of mural making throughout history that they're used as a means of putting across political or social ideas, which is fine. But if it gets to a scale that it becomes, people are uncomfortable with it. And I was looking and just going through and just looking at, murals in Phoenix, and I was noticing that they are becoming more and more of a political bent. And so I'm wondering if pushback is a result of the fact that people are now uncomfortable with, these political ideas placed at such a scale, like in their face every day. One of the things about the murals that you do and the murals that were done around the same time that you were doing yours is they're really fun. They're not intimidating. They're not challenging in the sense that, like, you have to really think things through in a political sense. So I wonder if that's part of it. I mean, do you think that there could be pushback from the actual content of the murals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with the way things are going, everything's so politically charged these days. It's really hard to, of course, everybody has an opinion. And, it's kind of gotten to the point now, like, with everybody having social media and everybody having this platform to speak their mind, that, I think things have gotten very noisy. And it's hard to, like, differentiate the noise from, like, impactful communication. Like, if you were to see a politically charged mural, it wouldn't be doing its job if, it really, like, turns you off. It should be, like, there to, like, show you a different perspective, or to, like, kind of present itself in a way that, is more enticing rather than, averting. And I think that's just, art being a means of communication. If you're not communicating well, then you're not doing your job. You're kind of adding to noise. And I think that's really important when, you're going to approach something with some kind of agenda. And I think it's important to have, challenging murals and artwork. I don't think, I just think that, if you're going to go that route, you should have a good way of communicating what you want to say without, creating more problems.
Yeah. And speaking of problems, this is another thing, too, that I found really, really interesting, because it seems to be very much centered around the murals in the Phoenix area. And that's the murals as backdrops for advertising, and particularly the automobile industry. I think it's Chevrolet specifically that is using these murals as a backdrop to sell their vehicles. And, I was looking up a little bit about copyright law, the economic benefit that would be due to artists. And a lot of artists now are very concerned that murals that they painted just to paint, it would be as if someone put, an SUV in front of your little shop of horrors building and then was selling that SUV with you as a backdrop. And the artists that are saying, well, this was not our intent. And they're now pushing back, and it's going to be very interesting to watch the legalities of this thing working its way through. What I was reading is that in terms of murals, that there's 4 things that would be part of the copyright. It'd be the characteristics of the work, how it is being used, how much of the work is shown, and whether it's an actual infringement on the artist's market. And so I wonder if you might want to speak to that. If you were looking through a magazine and you saw the brand new Ford SUV, pickup truck, whatever it is, parked in front of your mural, and you had never given them permission to do that, what would you do about that?
I think my feelings on it are, it's like, I think murals to me are different than, like, maybe printed artwork or something that you would hang on a wall in the privacy of a gallery or a home. I think murals, when you do a mural, you're kind of making that for everybody. I think, it becomes public art. And I could see where, people would, want to protect their work. But at the same time, like, you're kind of putting it in someone's face, whether they like it or not. So it kind of becomes public. And I think it's kind of possessive to be like, well, I own that block where I put my mural and you can't take pictures there or park your car there. There have been times when, I see people using my work as backdrops. There was one on Facebook that I saw. It was this kind of like band that looked kind of like this weird, I don't know, 90s butt rock band. And it was actually really funny to me, but like at the same time, like, it's not like, I don't see it as like an extension of what I do or something that I could relate to. I think it was a very odd backdrop for this band to like stand in front of my mural. That's kind of goofy and silly, but they were all about it, and I'm not about to tell them that hey, that's mine, you can't use it, because I kind of put it out there in the public, whether anybody likes it or not. That Nerd Monster mural, it was on Grand Avenue, which is this diagonal street. It's one of the only diagonal streets in Phoenix, and it runs out of Phoenix right from downtown, and it's the old highway to Las Vegas. So like, a lot of people who go to work downtown, they would drive Grand Avenue, and when they get close to downtown, it's kind of like bumper to bumper, and they're forced to like look at my mural because it's like kind of, you can't miss it. It's on this diagonal wall, pretty much facing traffic. And, I think if I'm going to force people to look at that, then I can't really say, you can't, you have to look at it. You can't like, take pictures of it and use it for your own benefit. I mean, I have to be like, okay, I put it up there, my hands are off, it's kind of up to the elements now.
That's really interesting, because it's, the argument made by the murals that are kind of like pursuing the legal avenue is that someone is basically selling a product, and that part of that sales pitch is whatever is behind it. In this case, the mural that they've done. But, it's funny because I was thinking about that too. And the very nature of it being a kind of public domain is that's part of what it is. I mean, the thing about murals is that they're creating a very public persona, a very public language. And so I don't know, as I was reading that article, I didn't know what I thought about it. I just was so curious to see what you thought about it, just, as someone who's made a great deal of murals, as to if you saw them behind as something that was being sold, that maybe your mural would help sell that product. But it sounds to me like you're not too concerned.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too concerned. There's that whole thing that happened to Matt Fury where they took Pepe the Frog and made him into like this meme, and I'm sure you know about that frog, right?
Yes, I do. That's a really interesting one. Yes,
he made that comic book character, and it was an underground comic, and these people just kind of took Pepe and they made him their own. And it's kind of fucked up. But at the same time, like, you're going to put these things out into the world. You can't be mad if the world's going to, like, latch onto it and, really identify with it. It's kind of like that thing that happened with Calvin and Hobbes, too. Like, Bill Watterson, he didn't want, any stickers or like, no toys, and so like people started bootlegging that Calvin pissing on Ford logos and stuff, and it kind of created this like own little thing where oh look, it's that guy that pisses on stuff, and they didn't even relate it to the comic anymore.
Yeah, well, and it's also funny because one of the things that happens is I think that a lot of people don't even realize what the source material is. I mean, I guess for those of us that understand the source material might get a little aggravated or not. I don't know. But I think that by and large, many people that don't know what the source material is, it doesn't make any difference to them anyway.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just an image.
Right.
So I got to ask you something because I couldn't find anything other than writing about it. And now I need to know. The Mesa Contemporary Arts Museum, you had a thing in there called the Sideshow. And apparently that was kind of like a byproduct of the Civic Center Library, Luster Kaboom Funhouse. What was the Sideshow?
Yeah, a lot of things came out of that. Came from that library show. I remember just all of the stuff that I built for the library show. I ended up keeping and repurposing for like the selfie stations and stuff. So like the Sideshow, I was using a lot of the materials from that library show, and I made this. I forget how it came about. I think Tiffany wanted me to do a project in their little project room, and so I built a little circus sideshow, and it was Harry Jerry, and he was like this hairy guy. He was sitting in his little exhibit, and he was just like looking at a cell phone, like he's bored, waiting for the next showing or something. But it was like just a funny sculpture. Again, kind of like going back to that weird carnival theme. I think it got kind of people started really identifying me with that whole carnival thing, with the carnival rides and circus stuff, especially after the fun house.
Yeah, well, but that's where you started. I mean, I was reading, and you were talking about earlier that the carnivals, and you said you didn't say it, but I read this, that they were in Chandler during the winter. So tell me, where is Chandler? Is that like outside of Phoenix?
Yeah, Phoenix has a bunch of cities all clustered together. There's Mesa, Tempe, Gilbert, Glendale, and it's just like it's just a ton of cities all clustered into Phoenix. They say Phoenix is as big as LA size-wise, it's just not as dense population-wise. But Chandler is it's out by where I used to work for that sandblasting company, and where I first started doing the rides. There was a plot out there, an acreage where they would just come and park right next to the sandblasting place.
And just basically they would be there for the winter.
Yeah, they would stop and repair the rides. Bob would fix all the rides, and I would paint them. And I think some point when they were there, they would have this ostrich festival, and it was like across the street, and there'd be a bunch of rides, and they'd kind of do
ostriches. I'm assuming. So is that what an ostrich festival? Is that what it means? There's like a lot of ostriches.
They kind of, they have like ostriches and races or something. I know I've been there before, but I can't really recall. It's just like kind of a big festival.
Okay. Okay, so now I want to ask you about your studio situation, where you're living, what you're doing. So one of the funny things I was talking to you about this, before we started recording, is that I was trying to determine, where you even were. And it turns out you're in Flagstaff. You moved to Flagstaff. You now have a new child, and congratulations, by the way, for that. So tell me about Flagstaff. Tell me about your studio, what it is you're working on, if you're moving back into murals, or if you're working in just tell me what you're doing.
So we moved up to Flagstaff. We're gonna have a baby, so we moved up here to kind of get away from the summertime. But we moved up here. My wife's father has a big homestead up here that's been in the family since the early 20s. But it's really great. He has like 5 acres up here. It's right in the middle of town, and It's been in their family for generations. And so we're camped out here, and it's been really awesome. The summer's been so awesome. We're right in the middle of, rainy season. The baby's great. Little Cleo, she's been a real awesome, fun baby to have around. There's also other kids here running around. So it's been really, really fun, living with her folks. And we kind of have like this whole wing of the house to ourselves. So we kind of like just live back here, and I have a little spot where I can work. Right now, I'm getting ready to do some illustrations for the New Times. They have their best of issue coming out, so I'm doing a cover and some inside artwork for them. I'm getting ready to do some more mural work for these clients that I have out in Phoenix. We're probably going to do that sometime in the fall. But they just built a new building in their backyard. And so we're going to add to that. They're really awesome. I've already painted they live on I want to say like an acre, but I've painted their whole backyard with this funny mural that's just kind of all over the place. There's like a fairyland and an outer space fight and a beach scene. And next they're going to do this big skateboarding theme with hot rods. So that's going to be super fun. What else?
Well, as far as I can tell, too, being around children, it seems to be a very important part of what feeds you creatively, at least in what I was looking at preparing for this interview, that it matters a great deal, and it keeps you in a really clear and kind of clean, creative space. Am I correct on that?
It's funny. I've always tried to avoid, I remember my first marriage when I had my kids. Before we got married, I wasn't planning on having children. And I kind of grew up in a big family. And I remember when I was 16, my mother, she had a surprise baby, my sister Kelly. And I remember growing up, raising Kelly from a baby and thinking, oh man, this is so much work. I don't know if I want to do this. And so I was always kind of, I was trying not to have so many children, but having them, it really kind of, it changes a lot, especially with Cleo. Cleo, I'm really enjoying. I've had all this time to really spend with her, during this quarantine. Normally I'd be out, doing stuff and keeping busy, and I wouldn't have so much time to spend with her. But it's been so nice to just really enjoy her. She's 6 months now, and these past 6 months have gone by so fast, and she's grown so much, and she's changed from a little squishy baby to this little tyrant that'll eat strawberries. And,
becoming a person. I mean, the personality is now emerging.
Yeah, she's a real character. And my other children, they're really, Lily and Lando, they're getting, they're both teenagers now, which is wild. Lily's a great artist. She does digital art, and she's always making these anime type characters and illustrating them, and I think that's so awesome. She's really artistic. And then my son Lando, he's also artistic, but I don't think he's been painting recently, in the recent years, but he's a really good painter too. He does these watercolors of dogs that I really liked, that I'd really like to see him do again. And then Marlo, she's going to be 5 in about a month, or actually in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's so crazy being around kids. And,
and it sounds like you're in a great creative space because of that. I mean,
you just sound like you've got a very balanced and productive and creative life. It sounds great.
It's had its ups and downs. It's funny. Like I always think about, oh man, if I could go back and talk myself out of this art business, I probably would. But
yeah.
I'm definitely at a place now where, I'm really enjoying it. And, the stuff that I make is really gotten a lot of appreciation and a lot of good feedback. And I'm really grateful for that because that hasn't always been the case. I think, like for any artist, it's kind of like this roller coaster ride of, ups and downs. But yeah, I think right now I'm in the best place that I've ever been in my life. And, the stuff that I'm making now, I'm really psyched about. And, having Cleo and doing stuff with her, and it's been really awesome.
Yeah, well, congratulations on all of that. I mean, I guess we should wrap this up. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, and totally.
You just sound like you're in such a great space, and I just love your work. I think it's refreshing because it's not in your face. It's just fun. Your work is very fun. It's outrageous. It's just I really enjoyed spending time with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And as always,
excellent.
Chris, thanks for setting this up.
My pleasure. It's always fun. And David, if someone wants to see more of your work, where can they go online to follow you?
Probably just Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Luster Kaboom. Also on Facebook as Luster Kaboom. Most of the stuff goes there. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, cool. Well, yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Philip.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.